So I've been a fan of Vertigo games for a while. If you don't know who they are, they made Arizona Sunshine 1 way back in the day and After the Fall. So they're one of my favorite VR developers, and also they're one of the oldest VR developers. They date way, way back. So when I saw they were making another game, I was very excited when I heard that the first Arizona Sunshine was getting a sequel. I do respect the first game, but when you play it, you can really tell it's from 2016, 2017. It's good, especially for its time, but compared to other more recent games, it just doesn't hold up very well. VR as a field was just very, very different back then. It's not a fault of the game at all. It's just VR has changed so much in the last several years. Arizona Sunshine 2 still does keep the main idea of the first game, though. Unlike After the Fall, which was sort of a Left 4 Dead type of gameplay loop, Arizona Sunshine 2 is a linear campaign. If you played games like Half Life Alyx, this will feel pretty similar. You'll pick it up pretty quickly. The gunplay is a bit awkward at first, especially when reloading. I should probably mention here that I was playing on a Valve Index, so this might not apply to every headset. And after a while, I got used to it. I still occasionally accidentally grab the top of my gun or the prime handle, though, while trying to grip it with both hands. It feels like a lot of the gunplay is a modified version of After the Falls. In fact, there's a few things in this game that feel like they were pulled directly from that game and modified. And that's not a bad thing necessarily, but if you played After the Fall, you will notice a lot of stuff got pulled over from that game. Personally, I don't care if companies flip a few assets between games, especially if it saves budget and allows them to put it towards other things that are more useful. It's when the entire game is just reused assets that I have a problem. But in Arizona Sunshine 2, the only things I noticed that were obviously pulled from After the Fall were things like weapon models, gore, and a few other small things. And they weren't just wholesale ripped from After the Fall, they were clearly modified to fit this other game. They just saved themselves a bit of work by grabbing those versions of them. Also, like After the Fall, Arizona Sunshine 2 has a lot of minor bugs. For example, in the first load zone of the game, at least on launch day, there was a bug that caused the protagonist to say he was thirsty every couple of seconds. I don't even know why this line is there. There's no thirst or food mechanics at all. After I reached another load zone, this bug went away, and now on my second playthrough, I haven't had this happen again. But that was pretty annoying for the first 10 or so minutes I was dealing with it. Thankfully, this was probably the most egregious bug I dealt with on my first playthrough. I had another really annoying one in Horde mode, but I'll get back to that. But still, the game is overall pretty stable. None of the bugs I ran into were crazy game breaking ones that ruined the whole game. They were all minor things like that. Like the fact that the most annoying one I could think of is this "I'm thirsty" one. Really shows how stable the game is. Because this was annoying, but it didn't break the game. It didn't mess with my play at all. It was just mildly irritating for like 10 or so minutes. So I touched on this a bit before, but the gore in this game is very similar to After the Fall, where its headshots are highly explosive, like popping a grape, and the regular body shots are not quite as satisfying, probably intentionally, but overall it's still very visceral. Definitely would scare out of touch politicians and Facebook moms, that kind of thing. And they also bothered to let you cut the heads in half with the melee weapons, which I am sure was not a trivial task to get working. So I do appreciate that too. That brings me to the next thing, which is that this game has some of the best melee combat I've seen without being like at all similar to any other game with good melee weapons. Just like the guns, they're satisfying to kill things with. My only problem is that sometimes it's hard, sometimes it's awkward to swing them and like hit enemies' heads. And also the way that the crowbar breaks, like when it's at half durability, makes it kind of awkward to use. But that wasn't a huge deal once I got used to it. And the zombies themselves aren't too complex. There's the normal ones, the fast ones, the fat ones, the occasional armored one. And honestly, that's fine. it's a zombie game. I'm not expecting super intelligent enemies. I just want them to try swipe at me so I can train them like COD zombies. So already overall, the most important parts of the game, the weapons and enemies, are good. And there's only a few criticisms I have with them. So let's get to those. First, the ammo is really, really weird in this game. I don't know if I missed something, but there were rifle magazines littered all around long before I got my first rifle. I was completely full on rifle ammo without being able to use any of it for quite a while. Hey, so I'm here in editing now. I've started my second playthrough, and it turns out I am just dumb. There's an AK in like the first couple levels, so I just missed that. The first rifle weapon I actually ran into was the pump action one. So yeah, I missed quite a bit. That was just my fault, not the game's. Also, another criticism with the guns is this is something that drives me insane anytime it's in a game. The pump action weapons let you pump them even if a round is chambered, which wastes it. Just stop it from pumping. This is infuriating in every game that does it, and sometimes it's annoying enough to keep me from actually using the pump action weapons. I don't know why developers always do it this way. It is so annoying. There are also a few places where the game does get pretty laggy, especially when there's like a lot of zombies somewhere. The game does lag a bit, and I'm playing with a decently powerful rig, so there's no excuse for that. That'll probably get better as the game gets updated. That probably just wasn't super optimized yet. I'm sure they'll fix it as they get further down the line. And finally, sometimes when climbing and I had to reach up high, I ended up grabbing my shoulder gun instead. I think the hitbox for it is too big or something. If you look at my full footage, which I know no one will, you can see my body language getting visibly angry every time that happens. And while I'm on the topic of the climbing, it's as jank as any other VR game. That's not a problem. There's just not much to say about it. It's the same as any other game with climbing. If you've played, it's less jank than Boneworks. It's more stable than that. But it's like any VR game with climbing, like Zero Caliber, anything like that, it's all the same. You'll know how it works. It'll be just as jank and just as awkward to use. So that's everything related to the player themselves. There's one thing I neglected to talk about so far, and that is on purpose, which I'm, of course, talking about Buddy. Buddy is a dog that you pick up early in the game from a crashed helicopter. He follows you around and helps you fight zombies. Now, normally I hate companions like this in games because when they have it, they often end up being like an escort mission. Like, I despise Ashley in Resident Evil 4. Thankfully, Buddy doesn't work that way. He's much more like Atreus from God of War. You don't have to protect him. He doesn't do anything stupid. He just occasionally helps you. The game is more fun with him there and compared to when he's not, plain and simple, which is good. And because of that, I actually grew to like him, even though I'm not someone who likes animals. I normally hate animals, especially in video games. And that reminds me of something else that I wasn't expecting much from in this game, which is the story. I'm someone who doesn't often pay more than the bare minimum attention to story in games because I play for the gameplay and the gameplay alone. So when the story was actually decent, I was pleasantly surprised. And I'm not going to spoil it, but the story actually builds to a reveal that is decently well foreshadowed, but at the same time, not very predictable. I didn't see it coming at all. And I was genuinely invested in seeing where this was going and was even feeling a bit apprehensive about something the story seemed like it was going to make me do towards the end. And it's not exactly a terribly serious story, especially since there's only one character with a substantial number of lines, that being the protagonist. And normally I hate in VR games when your character won't shut up, but the way they wrote this guy who hasn't seen a human in years is great. For example, our protagonist calls the zombies Fred. It took me a second to figure out that's what he was doing, but this ends up being more important than I thought it would. And I honestly really like this, along with all the other weird things you hear him say. It really sells this idea of this guy coping with being alone for so long by saying just the stupidest shit to himself. So many of the things he said are hilarious, like shower thoughts type things that were really entertaining to listen to. The last thing I need to talk about is the horde mode. And it works about the same as After the Falls. You're stuck in a small area and you just shoot zombies. Like everything else I liked in this game, I don't have much to say about it. It's just fun. There's only one problem I encountered where a frustrating bug where no ammo spawned for the first couple waves, which was extremely annoying when I first played it. But that started working pretty soon before the zombies got too powerful. Like I was able to get to the waves where the ammo would spawn, and then it was fine after that. It just made the first couple waves unnecessarily difficult, and they might have already fixed that by the time this video goes up. I'm not sure. And that's about all I really have to say about this game. In conclusion, I really enjoyed it. It only took me about 5 hours to beat it on my first playthrough, but that's because I was playing on a difficulty that was probably too easy for me. And also, another reason is often, in my case, the estimated amount of time that it takes to beat a VR game is always a bit off for me. I tend to complete them in like slightly over half of what's usually stated. Like Hubris was stated to be like 8 hours long by most people who played it. It took me about 4 to beat it. So I think it's just the way I play games. I tend to complete them much faster. So I can't really pin that on the game. Also, it's not like my first playthrough will be the only one. I had more than enough fun that I will definitely be playing this again. And also, I want to go back through and like try different weapons. Like most of my playthrough, I was just picking up like very specific weapons. But my second playthrough, I'm trying to pick up more guns that are different from what I previously used. Use some of the stuff that I missed out on a bit, and see what the best loadout is. And that's probably going to give the game a ton of replay value for me. It's just going through deciding which weapons to use. So overall, I have to give this game a 9 out of 10. Now that might sound high for how many complaints I had about it, but they were all so minor, and the core gameplay was just so much fun that I honestly don't care. Especially with Buddy. I'm not going to spoil it, but the entire ending section with Buddy is just great. So this game might not be as groundbreaking as Arizona Sunshine 1, but it's just a fun, satisfying, and surprisingly good game that has a surprisingly good story that caught me completely off guard. If you liked the first game or After the Fall, you'll probably enjoy this one. Thanks for watching. I'm going to try to get this review up before Christmas. We'll see if I manage that or not. But whether I do, I highly recommend this game if you're looking for just a fun single-player VR game. So, yeah. And do all the YouTube stuff, like, comment, subscribe, whatever. If you've been on this platform long enough, you know what people ask you to do. I'm not going to be annoying about it. Just, if you like the video and you want to see more stuff like this, do that stuff so that I know that I should be doing more of it. Because I definitely want to review some other VR games if people are interested in seeing that. So yeah, see you in the next video, and Merry Christmas, and yeah, thanks for watching.